When I started this channel, I pretty much exclusively did Intel builds. I really did Intel only builds, the occasional Ryzen build in the 1000 series, maybe way back in the day. But up until about April 2020, 90% of my builds were Intel. And then that changed when the Ryzen 5000 series came out, and it pretty much just dusted whatever Intel had at the time. Now we have something interesting that competes directly with the Ryzen 5000 series, so I figured it's time to hop back into Intel. I'm actually pretty excited. So let's do an ITX build today and see how it performs. So with the recent CPU launch, I went back and forth about which components I wanted to pick up, which ones I wanted to test. In my main rig, I've been running a 5900X for about a year now. So I figured getting a 12700K would make the most sense so I could compare them directly, and that's what I ended up doing. So that's the 10-core, 20-thread CPU with both performance cores and efficiency cores. It should be great for gaming as well as doing rendering and some of the video editing stuff that I do. Depending on what you're doing, these modern GPUs and CPUs can suck up a lot of power and generate a ton of heat. So picking the right case, especially when we're talking about ITX systems, is super important. So I ended up going with the Meshalicious, which is a great compact ITX case that has a ton of ventilation and should be able to cool pretty much whatever you throw into it. For the motherboard, I went with the Gigabyte Z690i, and I went with this board specifically because it takes DDR4 RAM. With the crazy RAM prices for DDR5 right now, I just wasn't committing to that. I have a ton of really fast DDR4 RAM, so I'm gonna put 32 gigs of 3200 megahertz RAM in there, and it should be perfectly fine. Like most premium ITX boards, this one also supports dual M.2 drives, so I'm going to go with dual 500GB 970 EVOs. For cooling, I've got the Corsair H115i Pro XT. That's the 280mm rad on there, which should do a great job cooling the 2700K, and also has RGB LED, which should look good coming through the side panels of this case. For the GPU, I wanted to create a really balanced system, so I went with an RTX 3070 Founders Edition, which is a really good card. It's quiet, and it gives you a ton of performance. And lastly, for power, I'm going with the old faithful, the Corsair SF600. As with any new Z690 board, you should definitely update the BIOS before you turn on or try to install Windows on any new system. One thing I did notice about this board in particular was how beefy the heat sinks are. There are two M.2 slots, and they're both on the top side of the motherboard, which is really good. And there's a really, really robust cooling system that should keep everything in check temperature-wise. I was really impressed, and that shows through when you look at the actual temperatures and performance of the system. Now, actually, building with the new 12th gen CPUs isn't any different than building with any of the ones in the past, but one thing you do need to note is that if you have an existing cooler, it's not going to necessarily just automatically fit the LGA 1700 bracket. I had to order smaller standoffs from Corsair. You can get them for a couple bucks. I believe they were like $3, but you do have to get those because the existing standoffs that are included are either too small or too tall. So to get that proper fitment, just make sure that you have the included standoffs, or if you're getting a new cooler, make sure it's compatible with LGA 1700. The Meshalicious is built really, really well. There's space for everything. You see your 280mm rad spot there. Then we have our PSU area, which has more than enough space for a larger SFXL power supply. And the motherboard tray, again, ample space. You can have coolers of decent height in there as well if you didn't want to go with liquid cooling. On the other side, you can see the GPU bay. There's really nothing else on that backside, but you'll also notice there's plenty of room for a larger GPU if you want to go with one. The back of the case continues the extreme ventilation trend. You can see the I/O up top, followed by your power supply down below, and a cutout for your cables to go to your monitor. There's also 3 slots there if you wanted to use a smaller ITX GPU. On the bottom of the case, there's actually a cutout so you can see your GPU and plug your cables in. I recommend picking up some right angle adapters for either HDMI or DisplayPort. It'll make it a lot easier. Now, the side panels are really convenient. There's no screws or anything. There are some push pins that you see in each corner and one in the center. They line up easily and they look really good and clean. Once you have the panel in place, you can still see your components a little bit, which looks great if you have some nice lighting in there. For testing, I put the system into my gaming or entertainment center with my LG C1 OLED, so that's an 120 Hz TV, and I wanted to see how it could handle gaming. That's my preferred way to game at this point, obviously, and yes, I am still a controller person. It does look great in this system or on this system, but definitely the vertical case would certainly look better on a desk. Now, as for performance, this system really sings. I was very impressed with the 12700K. It is a gaming beast. If you are looking to do just gaming, I would say this is probably the best option right now, considering its price to performance. You really can't be beat. It's phenomenal. It definitely is a little bit faster for gaming than my 5900X, and obviously it's a little bit cheaper as well. So that's really, really good. I've been playing a ton of Halo Infinite and Forza Horizon, and in both those games I was easily able to get 120 frames per second at 1440p with no problem at medium or high settings. Not ultra, but if you go up to 4K, obviously you're going to be at that 60 or below mark. If you really want to go up to 4K, I definitely would recommend at least getting a 3080, if not a 3080 Ti or 3090. Temperatures were also really impressive. I heard some horror stories about the 12900K if you don't adjust BIOS settings just right, but with the 12700K, completely stock, it ran very fast, obviously out of the box. The stock clocks are very fast for these 12th gen parts, but also at idle, it was very quiet and cool. And when doing gaming, obviously, it was still very cool, and while giving me all the performance that I was looking for. So super impressed with these CPUs. Obviously, if you do stress test it, you run Prime 95, you can get it to heat up, but this 10-core part does a great job of managing heat. I think a lot better than what I've seen from the 12900K. So overall, I had a lot of fun building the system. Intel is finally back. It's good to be able to say that again. It's good that they're making viable parts that people actually want and that perform really well. So I've been using this as my secondary gaming PC, and it's so good that I might consider making it my main rig, but we'll see. Maybe I'll get a 12900K and switch it over. But overall, I think this is a great CPU. This was an easy to build system. The new platform is going to have its hiccups, such as if you read online, there's a lot of issues with some BIOS and getting everything set up and with some motherboards and so on and so forth. But I think it's going to mature, and it'll be a good platform that they can build on. So overall, great build, very easy. I'm very happy with it. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you liked the video. I'll drop links for everything we saw here in the description, as well as a link to the article on the website if you want to learn a little bit more. I'm Jay. I'll see you next time.